remembers her mum taking her to the zoo when she was very young to see this rare bird, the white stork. And now she is actually monitoring a growing stork population in her hometown. These storks were basically extinct in her area, and now the numbers have grown fantastically to about 1,600 breeding pairs in the Netherlands. So that's a very good success story, and we're really looking forward to hearing your talk about these very special storks. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you very much for this great introduction. I feel very honored to be on the other side of the screen now, presenting about the white storks. Well, after a few hiccups, we are here from the Netherlands about the Dutch white storks, the roller coaster life of the Dutch white storks. Well, once upon a time, there was this little girl. She was crazy about birds, and she looked the birds up in the bird book, and there she finds the white stork. And she asks her mother, "Where is this stork?" But unfortunately, the storks were extinct when she was little. You can see from the graphic in the right that the storks were not doing very well. The reasons why the storks were almost extinct in the 60s and 70s is the major cause is the habitat loss. After the war, the population was growing, the human population was growing, so there were a lot of mouths to feed. So a lot of habitat was turned into agriculture. They lowered the groundwater level for the machines to work on the lands. And people started to use a lot of pesticides, especially DDT, because people did not want the bugs in their food. But these poisoned animals were eaten by a lot of birds, also by the storks. And because of the poison, the storks died and the population dropped. There were just a few breeding pairs left, but to see this stork, I had to go to the zoo as a little girl to see this beautiful bird. Then the BirdLife, the Netherlands, started a reintroduction program. Storks were brought from Swiss and from Spain, and the young chicks were eventually released in habitats where the stork used to be active. And you can see that the stork wants and needs fresh water. So you see that a lot of the storks are around rivers in the Netherlands. And together with the reintroduction program, also the habitat was being restored. When we think about this stork, we think about mainly the white stork, because we recognize it as a symbol. I think everybody knows that it brings babies, it stands for luck, but there are 20 species of stork in the world. Here in the Netherlands, we only have the white stork breeding, and now and then we get a visitor that is the black stork. But a lot of different stork species are found in Africa and in the eastern part of the world. Also some in America and in South America. But this talk is about the white stork. And why is it that I am interested in this bird especially? That is because I was born and raised in the city The Hague. And the coat of arms of The Hague is this white stork. So probably I already saw this stork as a little girl, maybe on advertisements or in papers. And that's why I was attracted to this bird. Also, some other cities have the coat of arms, the white stork, and it is the national bird of Ukraine. And of course, the symbol that it stands for luck. That mainly has to do that the stork returns from the migration, and people associate the stork with spring and prosperity. It goes back a long time that the stork was around settlements. Here you see a painting of the 17th and 18th century, the golden century, and even on those paintings, the storks are well represented. Also together with humans, with settlements. It probably has to do with the fact that where there are people, there is farmland, so there is food available. But these storks are scavengers, so they are also very interested in the waste we produce. That's still the case nowadays. Also, with our high buildings, we provide a nice, solid place, a high place to nest. And of course, the city is warmer than the other areas around. So that are probably the main reasons why the storks are always associated with humans. So it's not a bird that you have to go and look for deep down in the bushes, or a bird that nests in a cave. It nests open, and it's a bird that you can see quite easily. And it was an employee in The Hague, because before the 1900s, there was a fish market, and of course, nobody wanted to clean the fish market afterwards. So they hired a few storks, they put them in an aviary, and when the fish market was done, it was the job of these storks to clean up. And then there was the new inventions like soap and machines to clean. So the bird was fired, and now it's not on the market anymore. But it is still in The Hague. And you can see on the screen where the Netherlands is based, and you can see on the star on the left side where The Hague is. It's near the beach. It also has a lot of agriculture areas around, and you can see that these storks nest near these areas. So they do not nest in the city center, because there is not enough food available for them there. But you can see the population, the breeding population, is in the north and a little bit in the south of The Hague. We have about 23 nests here in The Hague, and I will tell you a bit more about them. Well, this is the traditional nest, the nest that everybody recognizes from books, a high place and a platform for the storks to nest. But in the city, we have the urban storks, and they just look around and find their own place, like chimneys, electricity poles, other platforms, but they also nest in trees. We see that the storks nowadays are also more attracted to the trees. Well, here is an example of how it looks. So it's just a street in the north of The Hague, and the stork nests on this chimney. You can see the chicks also looking down on the street. But this is the other view taken from above, and there you can see that they not just see the city, but beyond the city, there's the land where they can find food. And this is a perfect place, because the storks, they need to defend their nest and their chicks. So what they prefer is that when one of the adult birds goes foraging, The other bird is on the nest, defending the nest. But when they have to take turns, it saves a lot of time that you see where your mate has been and where the mate has found the food. They have very good eyes, so when they take turns, it's very easy to recognize where there is food available. This is March, and the storks are starting their courtship. And they cannot. We just had a talk about bird song, but the storks, they cannot sing. Instead of that, they communicate by clattering their bills. And to make more impression on maybe other storks or intruders, they turn their head backwards and they clatter. They spread their wings and their tail to make a big impression. They are not really loyal to each other. The base of the storks is their nest. So if the female is on the nest, or if the male is on the nest and they are solo, and a female or a male joins, then the nest is the base. So especially when it's migration time and the male usually returns a bit earlier to the nest, and when there is another female joining him and he is attracted to this female, then he mates with her. But we've also seen a lot of fights when the original wife comes back, that she manages to claim back this nest. This can result in heavy fights. The storks usually start clattering when another stork is in the air. You can see that they can even clatter in the air when flying. Usually it's enough for an intruder to just go away because he does not want to get hurt. But sometimes the intruder just lands on the nests, and then it can result in heavy fights. And especially when the birds are stagging into each other with their bills, it can be a bloody scene, and especially on these white feathers, it can look pretty severe. Both male and female take care of the nests. So it's not just the male or just the female who makes the nests, but both work to get the nest ready for the season. They do not build a new nest. Once the storks have a nest, they just keep the nest. They clean up a little bit, but every time, every year, a new pile of nesting material is brought on the nests. So you can see that it's growing and growing. It does not look very comfortable, all these branches, but in the middle there's a little bed, a little crib for the chicks to be in. These chicks are just out of the egg. They're just a few days old. As I told you, here in the Netherlands in March, the storks are mating. We do not have eggs yet, and we do not have chicks yet. That will be a bit later. The storks, they lay their eggs every other day, so you can see a difference in age of chicks. You can see it here on the photo. These chicks are about 2 weeks old, the youngest one, but you can see that the chick that hatched earlier is a lot bigger. When they are about 4 or 5 weeks, they can stand on the nest, but they still have their downy feathers. And when they grow a bit more, these are 8 weeks old storks, and they are almost as big as their parents. You can tell them apart that the adult stork has a red bill, And the young one has the black bill, because if it grows a bit more, it's difficult to see from the posture which one is the young and which one is the adult bird. So just look at the bill, and that makes the difference. Well, to grow this fast, there is a lot of food necessary. And the food is not divided among the young. The storks, they return to the nest and they regurgitate the food, and the storks have to pick up their own food. And that's why you see that when the chicks who are the strongest get the food first. First come, first served. The prey that the storks bring are very small, and I will show you in the next slide what the menu is. Usually this menu already has a lot of water in the prey, so it's not really necessary for the storks to bring water to the young. But when it's very hot, it's better for the young to, for example, cool down, and that's what the stork is doing on the right photo. It's like giving the stork a shower to cool down. The menu of the stork. You might think that this very big bird eats a lot of big prey, but it's not the case. The main food source for especially young storks are earthworms, because they have a lot of protein. Also bugs and mice. And how do we know what the stork eats? Well, we observe it in the field, but the best way is to find the pellets. The food that the stork cannot digest is found in pellets. You can see these small beetle leftovers in the pellet of the stork. We also find small bones of, for example, mice. The stork has to depend on a good eyesight. They look for their prey, but they're also very keen and very opportunistic when there is food somewhere, especially when the farmer is working the land. The storks, they recognize the machinery, and they know when the machinery is in the field that it will stir up bugs, worms, but of course also a lot of animals get hurt or get wounded by working on the land. And scavenger stork cleans up after the machines. As I told you, they are very opportunistic, and a lot of storks, they find their food on waste. Especially in Spain, there are still a lot of open dumps, and on migration, the storks go there to have a meal. You can imagine that it's a place where there are a lot of flies, mice, rats, but also human waste leftovers. So they're not very picky. They just go where there is food abundance. And when they had enough food, they're about 9 to 10 weeks old. They start and practice their flight exercise. They do not leave the nest immediately. It takes about 1 or 2 weeks to get strong and to get the confidence and to practice, and then it's time for them to leave the nest. But they will return every night to sleep and to get fed, but it will gradually they will become more independent, and finally there's the time to go and leave the nests. Then there are a lot of dangers, and there are a lot of things that they have to discover, like that you're not a duck, so that you have to avoid water. They walk on the roads, and they go and forage together. And this is a very dangerous time, especially in the city. When they left the nest and it's autumn, then it's time for the storks to migrate. From the ring research we do, we know that almost all young chicks go on migration because there's no need for them to stay. They are not able to reproduce yet, so they go on this journey. For the adult population, it's somehow a dilemma. Some adult storks, they stay on the nests, and that has an advantage that you do not have to make this dangerous journey, and you are able to defend your nest. So when it is spring, you are already on your nest, and there is not a lot of chance that somebody else steals your nest. But when you migrate and you're not back on time, then there's the risk that when you return, there's somebody else, another stork, on your nest. About 60% of the storks, adult storks, they migrate. And we see from the ring research that it's different. Sometimes an adult stork stays during winter, and maybe 1 year later it migrates. So it's not when one stork, adult stork, is on a nest and it does not migrate, that it's always on a nest. It can differ from year to year. But all the young storks, they go and they make their way south. Here in Europe, we have two different routes. The storks from the Netherlands, they follow the western route, and the storks more from Germany, from the east, they follow the eastern route. And that is because the stork is highly dependent on thermal lifts. It needs to soar, and over land there are thermals, but over the sea there are no thermals. So the stork, they look for a place where there is not enough, where there is a lot of land, and the crossing between the sea and the land is very short. When they winter, you can see that they winter at the places where there are former stork stations. That are the places where the reintroduction program was. But also you see that it's in areas where it's wet, near rivers. But how do we know where the stork migrates to? Well, that's an interesting story, because in 1822 in Germany, a stork was found with a spear through his neck. And they were quite intrigued because the spear was not made in Europe. This was a spear from Africa. So then the researchers were starting and thinking, well, maybe the stork has been to Africa, and there are more storks like this with these spears found. So that's when people started to think about maybe the birds do not disappear, but they migrate to another place. Well, nowadays it's more easy because of bird ringing. So we mark the individual and we can see where the bird goes to. We have recoveries from, for example, France and Spain. And for example, in Belgium, there is a project with GPS taggers. So you can literally follow the stork with your mobile phone. I was very interested in the storks in The Hague. And that was because a lot of people told me that they think that the storks in The Hague are not wild, but they are like zoo animals because they never leave the city. You always see them here. The other complaint was that there are too many storks and too many nests and too many chicks, because nowadays we see a lot of storks. And I was interested, is this true? Do they stay? Do all storks stay during the winter? And are these pairs a pair for life? And what about the chicks that are born in the city? Will they all return to the city to breed? And is that the reason why we see so many storks? And do they also choose the same nest? If a chick is born on a chimney, will it return to The Hague and also claim a chimney? And what is the survival rate of the storks? That's why I started a ringing project about 11 years ago. And I will take you through the results of this ringing project. But first, when you want to ring a stork, how do you do that? The nest is high. Are the storks dangerous? Well, we will have to find out. First, it's important the age of the chicks, because when they are too big, then there's the risk that they fly off the nest. And when they are too small, the ring does not fit the leg. When you go and you ring the storks, of course, you have to manage the safety and the weather. It's quite a project to start, because when you want to ring a stork, the stork nest is often on a landowner. The landowner, you have to ask the permission to ring the storks. Also, the storks on the chimney, you have to make sure that you have all the permissions to reach the nests. It also attracts a lot of public, so you have to be able to tell the people what you are doing. Because one of the first times that we tried to ring the storks, people called the police and they were telling that somebody was trying to steal storks from the nests. So we learned from that, and nowadays we inform the public that we do have good intentions, that we ring the storks and that we take them back to the nests. Also, because of the height, we need an aerial work platform or a mountaineer to help to ring the chicks. Well, this is when you reach a stork nest. And they are not dangerous at all. Because when there is danger, the storks go into so-called akinese. That is that they play dead, they lower their heart rate, and they do this when there is danger. So not just when we ring the birds, but also when there is maybe a big, how you call it, roofvogel. When there's a buzzard or a big bird that might have interest in eating a stork chick, they play that, and a lot of predators, they do not eat dead birds. So they see this on the nests, they hover over it, and they think, a bunch of dead birds, I'm not interested, and they just fly off. Also, for the birds themselves, it's best to lower their heart rate and to keep calm. You can also see from the area around the nest that they keep their own crib clean, and the poo is done over the nest. Also, when we take the storks out of the nest for a brief moment to do our measurements and to ring the storks, you can see that they still play dead. There is in the Netherlands a standard for all young chicks. We take the same measurements so we can compare our data. We look at their feathers and we look at their health, and then they get the ring with a unique number, and the letters NLA stand for the Netherlands. We depend on recoveries, birders that maybe watch the stork with the telescope, or they take a photograph. And in the database, they send us a recovery of the stork. They give their observation through the website of the ringing station, and that's when we know where the storks are. Well, the first year I was ringing the storks, I thought, well, this is very, very interesting to do. And I was, of course, after my first ringing job, very interested in the first nest. And it was a bit of a disappointment because the first stork that left the nest, there were 3 young birds on the nest. So you would say a lot of storks, like a lot of people say. But the first bird, he was a victim of a car collision with a car. So unfortunately, one of the 3 birds died. Unfortunately, the second one had a collision with an electricity wire. So there, the second bird died. I was happy that the third bird made it to France, but unfortunately, he was on an electricity pole and electrocuted. So then I had kind of the proof that it's not the case that all storks, that when you see a stork nest with 3 healthy chicks, you can say it's a success. The danger starts when these birds leave the nests. You can see the information about the ringing that we ringed a lot of chicks here in The Hague. It's not necessary to ring them all, but to have a good overview of the data, we tried to ring as much as possible in these 12 years. There are quite a lot of recoveries, and that's because in areas like Spain, there are a lot of birders who help us with ring reading on, for example, these dumps and these waste dumps. They do not read the rings of the storks only, but there are also a lot of seagulls migrating. So there are a lot of active birders who go out and try to find as many ringed birds. We have recoveries from Spain, France, Belgium. That's the migrating route. And there is a very nice sighting that one of the Hague white storks made it to Morocco. I think it's quite special that these young birds just leave the nests. They do not follow their parents. They just go and migrate. So there must be some kind of navigation in their heads. They know where to go to, and they just spread their wings and fly from Belgium, France to Spain, and some even cross the middle of the sea and go to Morocco. As you can see that there is a lot of danger, not just in the city, but also on their way. There's, for example, also still people who are active hunters in France. So the storks are still hunted. Let's have a look at some of the recoveries we had, because one of the questions was, if a young stork is born and raised in The Hague city, does it return to The Hague? Well, no. This stork went to a completely different place, to Middelburg. It was raised on a chimney, and it is now breeding, as you can see on the picture on the right, that is now breeding on a platform. Another example of the young stork is this one. This one indeed returned to The Hague, also on a chimney nest. So you can see that there's 2 sides. Some storks, they just go back to The Hague to nest, but not all of them. And this is one of the most beautiful places. It's in Wassenaar. And this young stork was born on this beautiful monument, but when it was grown, it chose a tree nest. And it did not stay loyal to its partner and the nest, but this year it decided to change partners and change nest, and it chose for a platform. The ringing project was not just the ringing and getting a lot of data, but it turned out that it's also teamwork, and that we could give some advice, that we could do some promotion, and it had to do with rescue. And I will take you through these points now. This is the first example, the example of the teamwork, because these storks, they nest very high, and I was looking for a company who could help me reach this nest. But it was quite expensive to hire an aerial work platform, so I turned to the fire department. It was just a small question. I ring storks for research, and maybe are you interested in helping me ringing these young storks? And I was quite surprised that they were very enthusiastic, especially after the first time that we ringed these storks, because it was the case that the fire truck could not reach the area. So for them, it was a good training to see where there are hiccups when there's a true emergency, that they can already prepare to make sure that they can reach the building. We also discovered that some roofs were not safe. So now when it's time to ring the chicks, they are very interested to help me, because it's a training for them. Also, when they have to rescue birds in case of emergency, they now know how to handle young storks. The other part of the ringing is that I came into contact with people who are not really a fan of the storks. And that's because they like to make their nest on this chimney. But the nest grows bigger and bigger and higher. And eventually the chimney is covered with all these branches. And when it's winter and people want to turn on their heat, it does not work. So people came to me and said, well, we do not like these storks because we have problems with our heating system. Then we asked ourselves, what can we do to help these people, but also to protect the stork's nests? Because legally, once a stork nests, it's protected and you cannot remove it. So here you can see that we altered the chimney, and the storks approved. They are having a nice and warm nest, and the heating system of this building still works. Another example of the chimney is that we made our own platforms. So it's still possible to use the chimney and the stork can nest there. We do not place these platforms randomly, but only when a stork is nesting on this place and there's a malfunction of the chimney. Another advantage of the ringing is that we can promote our bird life, the Netherlands and BirdLife The Hague. Because the stork is very visible, I try to promote the stork and their life. There is a film in the making. There are a lot of interviews about the storks. And of course, I take people on excursions to learn them more about nature and birding. And finally, rescue. when the young stork leaves the nest too early and we have to return it to the nest, we can look at the ring and see where the bird is from. And one example of the rescue is that we had a stork pair in The Hague, and they were very eager to build their nest, and they did not look at the area, they did not look at the traffic. So we had this sign made for the traffic to mind the storks. And I was not really prepared for the for the enthusiast reactions that people were very interested in this sign because it was the first in the Netherlands, and a lot of people came to take pictures of the sign. And I was very happy because I could tell them more about the storks and the life and the nature of The Hague. A lot of rescues are done when the stork leave their nest. They go to the stork hospital, and by looking at the ring, we can return the chick back to the nest. This is a place where I have worked for a few years, and it's very dear to me because it is the stork station. This is one of the places where the storks were reintroduced when I was a little girl. And it was a dream that came true for me, that when I was grown, I was able to work as a volunteer at this station. It is called De Lokkerij. It is run by Els and Frits Koopman. Unfortunately, Els passed away a few weeks ago, but Frits is still going strong, and he is looking after his storks. You can see that this reintroduction program started in 1969, and it was a huge success also because the habitat was improved and it was forbidden to use the pesticide DDT. In 1995, the breeding project ended, and the main focus was to keep the habitat of the stork up to date. And the Lokkerij is now more of an education center. When I worked there, it was also a stork hospital, and storks were brought in, especially young storks. Because it's not a nice story, but when the storks see one of their chicks is weak and they do not have enough food to feed the other chicks, then they choose the weak chick sometimes and they throw it out of the nest. When it is found and it's still alive, you can bring it to the stork hospital, and most of the chicks we get them to heal, and they are able to fly and to fledge. Also, it can be just an accident that a chick falls down from the nest, especially when they crawl for food. And also around the area of the stork station, we had the case that parents of the nest died, and that ringed adult birds were found near the nest, and that we noticed that there are chicks still in the nest helpless. And we were able to rescue these chicks. Then when the breeding season is almost ended and the chicks fly off, then we get the first fledglings, and they are often weakened after their first flight. They have to discover the traffic, water, high buildings, and they are brought to this stork hospital. I promised you a look behind the scenes, and when you work at the stork station, it's multitasking, because it's not just working with the storks, but we also make nest platforms and re-rescue storks on the way. Of course, I promised you some photos of stork chicks because I know that a lot of people from especially South Africa, they see these migrating birds, but they have never seen a stork chick. And these pictures are were all taken at the stork hospital. This is the stork just out of the egg, and we try to rescue it. And you see that the main food source of the stork is meat. And it was a bit difficult for me as vegetarian to cut all these meats for these storks. But I do it with pleasure to rescue them. This stork is a little bit bigger, but you can see it's still quite young because there's this egg tooth on the end of the bill. It's the tooth that most birds have, and they use it to get out of the egg, to open the shell. When the bird gets a bit bigger, you can see here that it tries to stand. It looks more like a chicken, but a few days later, they grow bigger and bigger. And when storks are brought to the stork hospital, we try to reunite them with other storks. We try to bring the storks together because the storklets, the young storks, they grow on a nest with their brothers and sisters. So you can also bring young storklets from different nests and bring them into one nest. Here you can see 3 different storks from different nests, and they grow up together just like brothers and sisters in the wild. And then we get this first fledgling leaving the nest and walking around. And new storks, they come in because these are the fledglings who got into trouble with traffic and high buildings. And the main reason why they are brought into this hospital is because of a palate obstruction. And that is because there are a lot of meals that the storks get from their parents, like rubber bands and plastic. When there is not enough food available, the stork adults, they want to raise their chicks and they just give them anything that they can get their hands on. And sometimes it looks like their prey. For example, these little black stones, they look like bugs, and the rubber bands look like earthworms. So when a stork is brought in, we give them some laxative, and it usually results in a lot of big pellets. These 2 pellets weigh half a kilo. So you can imagine that the bird is very relieved that it lost these pellets and it can eat again. Here you can see the storks, young storks, because they have their black bills, like in a 5-star hotel, waiting for their meal. And just like in nature, we do not present each stork their food, but it's brought in a bowl and they have to pick their own food. It's not really necessary to water them. Like the storks on the nest, we spray them with a little water when it's very hot. But you can see from this big bill, this stork is almost ready to leave the nest. Then they go to another area in the stork hospital where they can socialize with wild storks outside. And finally, it's time to open the door and they fly into the world and they become totally independent. Here you can also see that we ring the storks and that we have a lot of recovery, so that we know that when a young stork is brought in, it is valuable to rescue it and it becomes totally independent. it just flies off. And for me, this is a magic moment. Also with some tears, because you took care of this bird for 10 weeks. And then it leaves and you have to wait. Is there a recovery? Is it a recovery of a dead bird, or is it the recovery of a living bird? And maybe after a few years, it will return and I will see it again. From the Stork Hospital, we have some examples, and the first one is this bird brought in as a little chick and made it to Spain to winter and migrate to winter there. The storks, they are able to reproduce when they are over 2 years and 3 years old. And in the meantime, they just soar around, and usually they return to the country that they were born in. But it's not that they choose the same nesting spot, like a chimney or a platform. They make their own choice. Here is the one with the big pellet. You might think, what is happening to these birds when it flies off? Because it's used to be fed by humans, but you can depend it migrates, and eventually it will return and make its own nests. Well, this is the view of the white stork in the Netherlands. And you can see that I also use the ringing of the storks to make new stork fans and to tell people about birds and nature. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And if there are any questions, just put them in the chat box.
Thanks, Caroline. That was absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed that. You can see with all the clapping, a lot of people enjoyed it as well.
I will turn on the light because I'm in the dark.
See, you're sitting in the dark now.
Yeah. Yeah. At this moment, I'm working with parrots here in the Netherlands. So I'm staying not at home, but in a small cabin. And I just found out that I was in the dark all the time again.
That's fine. Your voice was very clear.
Okay.
Your presentation was great.
Yeah, I had to get a bit used to, because usually I give a presentation and I see the audience, and now it's just the screen, and I wonder.
No, it was excellent. Okay, we can start with the questions. I see David asks, and I'm not sure if you answered that question. You did talk about it. Do the nests in chimneys cause fires?
No, until now it has not caused fires, only just malfunction of the chimney and the installations. So luckily no fires. But it is a risk, so that's why we built these platforms, so the storks can nest there safely.
I'm sure the birds must get nice and warm with all that.
Yes, it is warm because because we go on the roofs with a group of volunteers to get this platform on the chimney, and it's usually not in the breeding season, so it's usually in winter, and it was very cold, but when we are on this chimney it was very hot. These storks, they choose the chimneys also probably because of its view. They can look at the foraging area, but it might also be interesting for them because it's warm.
Yes, yeah. I just commented as well, we see them here in Southern Africa, and they're very quiet and they're very placid, and they don't open their mouths and make any noise.
No.
But to see how aggressive they are on their breeding site was quite an eye-opener.
Yes, they are. The nest is very important because they build one nest and they have to keep it. It's not like other birds that they just use a nest and next time or next breeding season they build a new one. No, they just have to keep their nest, and they're very keen because it's It's difficult to find a new place to nest. And that's why it's also very attractive for other storks. Because once you have these nests, other storks, they want it because they know it's a safe place. It's probably in the area where I can forage. So they are very keen to steal the nests from each other, especially in the start of the breeding season. They can be very, very fighting.
Was there a project where people were encouraged to install poles?
Yes, it was in the beginning when the storks were not doing very well. We now have around 1,600 breeding pairs. But when I was a little kid, the storks were extinct. So everything was done to make sure that the storks would return. So the habitat was improved. It was not allowed to use dangerous pesticides. And people were asked, well, just make a place for the storks to nest, so on chimneys and on artificial nesting platforms. But nowadays, the storks also nest in trees, so it's not really necessary to make these artificial platforms anymore.
Yes. That's interesting. Yes, so they're going back to what they should be doing.
Yes. Yeah.
Project Energy, I'm not sure what your real name is, asks, how can we partner to start to conserve the storks? I think he's from Lesotho, yes, from Lesotho.
Well, that's a very good question, and that's also why, with the knowledge we have now, I'm not quite sure if we would start a reintroduction program, because the base is the habitat, to keep the habitat of the birds intact, so the birds can forage and they have a safe place to nest. So it all starts with a good habitat.
Yeah.
And also to look at our waste production, because we also see that a lot of storks, but also other birds, for example, they eat plastic or they feed the plastic and waste to their chicks. So that are two things to keep in mind: the habitat and the waste we produce.
Yes, in my province, we found a place where the abattoir was throwing away bits of meat, I mean, like in large quantities, and the storks actually stayed there and overwintered in South Africa because there was such a large meat supply.
Yeah, because as they are very opportunistic and they have to find their food somewhere. So when there is a place like that, they know it and they go there and they scavenge. They're scavengers. So
and Project Energy was wanting your contact details, Caroline. So maybe after this chat session, you can type in your email address in the chat box and they can take it from there. Paolo asks, at what age or weeks do you band storks?
They are between the 4 and 5 weeks old, and that's the leg of the stork is big enough for the ring, and the storklets are not as big that they leave the nest and they can fly off. They still have this akinese. They still have this automatic reaction that when there is danger, they just pretend to be dead. And when they're about 5-6 weeks old, it disappears and they also start to defend themselves.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Rosemary asks, what is their life expectancy?
In the wild, it's about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
But we have a old stork in the stork station, and it was 32 years old.
Ooh.
Yeah, and also in zoos, that's the age that the storks can reach.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so they have a very long lifespan, but once they leave the nest as chick, and they are safe from all these dangers. When they manage to survive that, that's when they can get very old. But most storks, the dangerous period is when they leave the nest. That a lot of storks, they do not survive their first year.
Yeah.
But it's the same with a lot of other migrant birds. That the dangers on the way makes a lot of casualties. Yeah.
Yes, I think with all migratory birds, if the weather changes suddenly or something,
especially now also with these climate change, and also still a lot of hunting, especially in the Middle East. So they have to overcome a lot of dangers to.
I thought that hunting was stopped.
No, it's unfortunately not. There are still a lot of areas where there is a very active hunting.
Oh, that's not good.
No, that's not good. No, and it's not for food. I can imagine that when you live in Africa and you do not have any food, and you live somewhere in the outback, and that you eat these animals, but the hunting I'm talking about is just for pleasure.
That's terrible. In this day and age, you'd think people would be more enlightened. I thought they'd stopped that.
Yeah, no, it goes from father to son because it's like a tradition. And also when we tell these kinds of stories, it might also does ring a bell with these people, that they might think of other ways to stop this hunting. There are a lot of eco projects that they leave the birds alone, and that they start these eco projects that tourists can come in to take pictures of the birds, and they organize excursions. So there might be a change in the future.
Well, let's hope, yes. It's so unnecessary, just shooting for fun, and not eating the bird, just shooting it for fun. Okay, Senes asked, could you share the average size and weight of the pellets with me, just to compare to my own research over in the UK?
Yes, I have her details, and I will give her some more information about the pellets. I have some photographs and some more information. I have her details, so I will email her with these details. Yeah.
Doris posted something in Dutch. I can only speak Afrikaans, so I can't read that. Maybe you can read it. It's fantastic.
Oh, maybe fantastic. Oh, yeah. It's fantastic the way I explained it. So
yeah. And Catherine Dempsey says, I live in Europe. When I was a child, back in 1959 to 63, we loved the stork nests on chimneys in France and the Netherlands. I was only 6 years old.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, they were almost extinct, and it was different in France. So,
Were there still some in France then? Or?
There were still some in France and in Swiss and in Spain, and these storks were used for the reintroduction program. Yes. Yeah.
Have you ever had any of your storks come to Southern Africa?
No, I have not, and that's not really a surprise, because the storks in the Netherlands, they take the western route. So the furthest recovery I had is from Morocco. Okay. And the storks that breed more east, like in Germany, they follow the eastern route, and they go all the way to South Africa. So, but
I must check. There was one that died near someone's land, agricultural land, last year, and I'm not sure where it was ringed, but they did find out where it was ringed.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'll send you a message.
Most likely somewhere in the east. Yeah,
it was, yes, but I can't remember now. I'll have to look up. Ian een geweldige presentatie, Caroline.
So maybe you can read it because it's all a bit of Afrikaans.
Afrikaans, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Roger asks how long the transmitter stays live. Solar?
Yeah,
Power?
we do not. I do not have the experience with the transmitters, but I know that they have a long life because they use a solar to get their battery charged.
Okay.
So it's I think it can last for years.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's solar powered. Tom asks, are the small rock in the stomach akin to gastroliths in reptiles to help grind the food if they eat tiny stones?
No, that's not the case for the storks. The small rocks, they just come when they forage by accident. And if there is not enough food and the storks adults, they have chicks, they want to give their chicks some kind of food. And then they just pick up rocks and glass and rubber bands just to make sure that their chicks are fed and they are quiet. But yeah, you cannot grow very old or you cannot grow very big on waste and stones. So these small rocks in the stomach, that's usually the case for parrots. They need it to digest their seeds. And the storks, they do not eat seeds, but they eat mostly flesh. So it's not necessary for them to eat small rocks to help
grind the food. Yes.
Grind the food, yeah.
Rosemary asks, did they not install wheels on roofs? I presume she means tires as a basis for nests, or was that just a story?
No, no. People were very interested, especially when the storks were almost extinct, because the stork is also the symbol for luck. So a lot of farmers, they installed these platforms on their house, because when a stork would nest there, it meant that the farm is safe.
Okay.
It's a part of the symbolism that the stork stands for luck. So people were very interested in having them on their roofs. But nowadays, people mostly complain about birds because they make a lot of noise or the bird poo. So, but in the old days, they were more interested in the storks because they brought a lot of luck.
Yeah, we have that with herons in my part of the world. They nest in people's gardens or trees on the pavements, and people don't like the noise and they don't like the smell and the
we have the same with like the Egyptian geese and the seagulls who nest, because a lot of habitat is lost. So you see that a lot of birds are coming into the city for food and for a safe nesting place because there's nowhere else to go for them.
And I don't know if it's Jean or Jean says in Dutch, thanks for the lovely presentation. Greetings from the OI team. The
OI team. Oh yeah, that's the team in Belgium.
Yes.
I really like that a lot of stork friends joined this presentation. Yeah.
Are there any more questions before we wrap up? Oh, that was a very good talk and many, many questions, which shows people were very interested.
And I'll type in
your email address.
I am also active on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So people can find me there.
Yeah. Okay, lots of thank yous from people. And just before we wrap up, on the 21st is another presentation by Jess Lund, When Perfection Isn't Enough, How Forktail Drongos' Egg Signatures Defend Against Near-Perfect African Cuckoo Mimicry. So if you're interested in that, please join. Please also spread the word about these webinars to your birding friends, and it'll be nice to grow this group. It's going very well. So yeah, spread it. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Derek. Derek has typed that into the comment section. You can read it there. Thanks. Are there any more questions? I think everyone's finished. Dank u vir die presentasie. I think that's about all. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
See you on the 21st again for the next webinar. Happy birding.
Happy birding. Bye-bye.
Bye.